Welcome to Adrian's Corner. I am Adrian, and on today's show we're going to discuss first impressions of Dying Light 2, now that it's out. It was a game full of development drama right up until a mere few days from launch, including the developer Techland begging players who had gotten leaked copies of the game to hold off of playing it until launch day, as without the day one patch, the game was apparently not in good enough shape for gamers to see yet. Something we talked about in more detail on a previous episode called Dying Light 2 Red Flags Haunts Its Pre-Launch Buyer Beware, which of course I will include in the description below. In any case, the full review of the game is coming, but as it is a fairly long game and will take time to complete everything to give our full feedback on, I felt it was worth sharing with you now the first 6 to 7 hours of my playtime on the game, and more importantly, what is holding this game back from greatness. And so, from Adrian's Corner, it's everything first impressions of Dying Light 2, starting now. So, Dying Light 2, a follow-up on the original Dying Light game, takes place 15 years after the events of the previous title. And as predictably as you might expect, the virus spread off the original island city of Haran despite a cure being developed, because corporate greed and because the script needed it to happen, I guess. It's essentially your standard Hollywood evil corporation trope. But whatever. So 15 years later, the world is pretty much gone with just a few small enclaves of humanity left in the world. The protagonist from the first game, Kyle Crane, is no longer the main character here. Instead, you get to control a new protagonist called Aiden, who is pretty generic as characters go, with his only motivation, so far in my playthrough, to find a long-lost sister he dreams about, and pretty much nothing else. Essentially, the new protagonist is just some generic schlub who has the personality of a brick. So the real question is, how did the game do so far? Well, for the purpose of this video, I'm going to break down the combat and parkour side of things, as this perhaps is the most important element of the game and in many ways is holding this title back, more so than perhaps the bugs, terrible friendly AI, etc., which I'll get more into in another video when the final review of this game is ready. But in the meantime, let's break the combat and parkour down. So, despite Dying Light 2's protagonist, Aiden, being an experienced survivalist who has not only survived the apocalypse, but has literally traveled thousands of miles on foot through the zombie-infested world to reach the start of this game, and yet he still manages to be a bit useless at the beginning. Why? Well, because Dying Light 2 is your basic RPG, and because the script says so. And I'm not talking about advanced mechanics like grappling hooks. Sure, it would be fun to have it right away, but it would take away from the game's overall experience, not to mention the joy and hook of discovery that comes with finding combat mechanics later on, which we saw them do fairly effectively in the original Dying Light. But no, I'm talking about the most basic of elements here, stuck behind a boring XP grind. See, when you first look out across the cityscape, you'll see a place brimming with potential. Tons of points of interest soon to pop up on your map, which you'd think would make for an exciting journey of scampering up drain pipes, running and jumping across rooftops, all the while experiencing the freedom and thrill that only parkour can give. You'd think so anyway, but no, it'll be many hours before you get your hands on abilities that will make traversing the city fun. It's crazy to me that even the most basic moves are locked behind this XP grind. You see, sliding, backstabbing, parrying, even something as basic as jumping a little bit higher than a normal person, literally all of these things you have to unlock by performing tasks. And what makes this even more disappointing is that, like the original Dying Light 2 already has a bunch of progression systems, which means that there are plenty of ways to keep its player on the hook without resorting to the ever-dreary XP grind. Frankly, it feels like most of the RPG elements in this game are nothing more than bloat, designed to pad out an experience that honestly would have been so much more fun without. It all just feels so unnecessary. And this is not to say that a good Dying Light RPG is impossible. There are ways to do it, while still making the experience fun. But this requires balance and careful consideration for each system you add to the game, making sure it is compelling and relates to the world you are building. Instead though, Techland just seems to have crammed this game full of these systems, regardless of how they might fit into this game, which unfortunately is a fairly common practice in many open world games of today. Worse still though, Dying Light 2 has found a way to take the moment-to-moment choices, like what ability to pick next, and make it uninteresting. Most of the early choices you get to unlock are really simple and basic. Sure, jumping a little bit further or having a little bit more health is nice, but it's missing that thrill you get of unlocking crucial combat abilities, which is extremely important as combat itself really isn't fun in this game without these combat unlocks. See, the combat foundations of this game are terrible. All you do is flail your weapons around at zombies or humans until your stamina bar runs out, or the enemy just stops getting up. It's a joyless exercise in repetition. I mean, sure, pretty early into the game you do get a flying kick, which is amusing, even if the mechanics are awkward, but other than this, it's just your basic dodge and attack. And to make matters worse, you can see reminders all around you that there is plenty of fun to be had, if only you had more abilities. The city itself is a sandbox playground, just begging to be explored, and is designed for a character who can traverse the terrain at breakneck speed, jumping, scampering, and leaping at impossibly dangerous speeds, and yet none of this will be for you for many hours into your playthrough. It gives the impression of playing an endless tutorial where the real game is always just right around the corner. Now don't get me wrong, the basic mechanics of the game, the parkour for example, is still pretty good right out the gate, but you can't help but notice the experience has been significantly hobbled. And I found it quite annoying that the game forced me to have to grind it out for so many hours just to get to a point where the experience for this game becomes enjoyable. A bad development choice if there ever was one. Which, frankly, is too bad, because this game overall, as it starts to open up, really is fun. The parkour, the combat gets better as you go along. There's so much to see and do. It's entertaining once you get past that initial joyless repetition that is the beginning 6 to 10 hours of this game. Honestly, it's a bad development choice, and I think this will hurt the game with a lot of new coming players. That being said though, I will have the full review once we've completed the game, and we'll let you know how it all turns out. In the meantime, that brings our episode to a close once more. As always, thank you so much for being with me here on the show today. From Adrian's Corner, I am Adrian, and I will see you all next time.